So, you've just lost a world war, your emperor has skipped town, and you need to build a new country. What do? Well, if you're 1919 Germany, you write one of the most progressive, forward-thinking constitutions in the world. It had universal suffrage, a Bill of Rights, the works. They also included a fascinating little feature called Article 48. This article essentially gave the president a magic wand to suspend civil liberties and rule by decree in an emergency. You can probably see where this is going. It's like installing an ejector seat in a car and giving the button to the most stressed out person in the passenger seat. A real break glass in case of inconvenient democracy clause, which, spoilers, they would break. A lot. On top of this constitutional quirk, Germany was handed the Treaty of Versailles. This wasn't just a peace treaty, it was a 200-page invoice for starting the most expensive bar fight in history. Germany had to pay crippling reparations, give up territory, and shrink its military to the size of a moderately ambitious police department. More importantly, it had to sign a war guilt clause, officially taking the blame for everything. This created the perfect breeding ground for the Dolchstoßlegende, the stab-in-the-back myth. The story went that the brave German army hadn't been defeated, but was betrayed by politicians and protesters at home. It was a national coping mechanism, and a spectacularly dangerous one, turning political opponents into traitors overnight. To pay for everything, the government decided on a brilliant economic strategy: printing more money. Shockingly, this did not make everyone rich. By 1923, German hyperinflation reached levels that are hard to comprehend. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January cost 200 billion marks by November. People were taking wheelbarrows full of cash to buy groceries. Children were using stacks of banknotes as building blocks. The real damage wasn't just economic, it was psychological. The entire middle class saw their life savings evaporate. It completely destroyed faith in the system, in the government, in the very idea that things made sense. When money is meaningless, people start looking for other things to believe in. Then, from about 1924 to 1929, things almost looked okay. This was the golden 20s. Thanks to a guy named Gustav Stresemann and a flood of American loans, the economy stabilized. The currency was fixed, factories started humming again, Berlin became a global center for art, culture, and science, cabarets were buzzing, expressionist films were being made, and physicists were rewriting our understanding of the universe. It felt like a return to normalcy. But the entire recovery was built on borrowed money and borrowed time. It was a great party, but the house it was in was structurally unsound and sitting on a geological fault line. That geological fault line was called Wall Street. When the U.S. stock market crashed in October 1929, American banks recalled their loans from Germany immediately. The German economy, which was basically running on an American credit card, imploded. Businesses failed overnight. By 1932, unemployment hit 30%. 6 million people were out of work. Soup kitchens and bread lines became the new normal. The golden 20s seemed like a distant dream. All that simmering anger from Versailles and hyperinflation came roaring back to the surface. Desperate people don't vote for moderate solutions, they vote for the person who screams the loudest and points a finger. The government's response was not great. The political system fractured completely. No single party could form a majority in the Reichstag, leading to a revolving door of chancellors. Unable to pass laws normally, they started leaning on that fun little emergency button, Article 48. President Paul von Hindenburg, an old-world military man who wasn't a huge fan of this whole democracy thing anyway, started ruling by decree. Between 1930 and 1932, the number of presidential decrees skyrocketed, while the number of laws passed by parliament plummeted. Democracy was already on life support. The people were getting used to the idea of one strong leader making all the decisions. They were just arguing about who that leader should be. Into this chaos stepped the extremist parties, offering beautifully simple answers to terrifyingly complex problems. On one side, you had the communists, promising a workers' revolution. On the other, you had the National Socialists, led by a failed artist with a talent for public speaking. Their platform was a cocktail of nationalism, scapegoating, and promises to restore German greatness. They blamed Jewish people, communists, the Versailles Treaty, and the democratic government for every problem. It was effective because it was simple. It gave people a target for their anger. While the moderate parties were busy bickering over budget proposals, the extremists were offering a sense of belonging and a clear enemy. In a storm, people will grab onto anything that looks like a life raft, even if it's full of holes. By late 1932, the Nazis were the largest party in the Reichstag, but they still didn't have a majority. The old conservative elite, men like Franz von Papen, were worried. They despised the charismatic leader of the Nazi party, but they feared a communist takeover even more. So they came up with a brilliant plan. They would make the Nazi leader chancellor, but surround him with their own conservative ministers. They thought they could control him, use his popular support for their own goals, and then discard him. Von Papen famously promised, "In 2 months we will have pushed him so far into a corner that he'll squeak." This goes down in history as one of the most catastrophic miscalculations of all time. It's like trying to domesticate a tiger by inviting it to live in your house. Less than a month after the new chancellor took power, the Reichstag building, the very symbol of German democracy, went up in flames. A Dutch communist was found at the scene and blamed for the arson. The historical debate about who actually started it is intense, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. The Nazis seized the opportunity with breathtaking speed. They declared it the start of a communist uprising. The very next day, Hindenburg was convinced to sign the Reichstag fire decree. Using Article 48, it suspended almost every civil liberty guaranteed by the Constitution: freedom of speech, press, assembly, privacy. It was the emergency to end all emergencies, the temporary measure that became permanent. With thousands of their political opponents arrested, the Nazis called for a new election. They still didn't get an absolute majority, so they moved on to the final step, the Enabling Act. The name sounds harmless, but its purpose was to give the Chancellor and his cabinet the power to make laws without the Reichstag's approval for 4 years. It was a bill to legally make him a dictator. The vote was held in a makeshift opera house surrounded by armed SA and SS men. They chanted threats at any arriving opposition deputies. To pass, it needed a 2/3 majority, which meant they needed the Center Party's support. After being promised protections for the Catholic Church, they agreed. And just like that, the German parliament voted to make itself irrelevant. Democracy didn't just die, it was escorted out of the building by an honor guard it had technically approved. With dictatorial power secured, the process of Gleichschaltung began. It means coordination or bringing into line, which is a terrifyingly dull word for what happened next. Every aspect of German life was systematically Nazified. Trade unions were abolished and replaced with a state-run labor front. All other political parties were banned. Youth groups, sports clubs, professional organizations, even glee clubs were either dissolved or absorbed into Nazi-controlled equivalents. It was a total social and cultural hostile takeover. There was no longer a private space separate from the state. The goal was to eliminate any source of independent thought or loyalty. Your only identity was to be German, and the party defined what that meant. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!